Ever read a story in the Bible and you're like, how did it get this messy so fast?
Yeah.
That's Genesis chapter 30 in a nutshell.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Family drama, rivalry, all kinds of twists and turns. We're going deep on this one, folks. Jacob, his wives, Leah and Rachel, and their expanding family. Welcome to the Make Heaven Credit podcast.
It is a chapter that really pulls you in, all these really intense emotions, really human desires. It makes you think, what does loyalty even mean? What is fairness? What does it even mean to be fulfilled?
Yeah. So Genesis 30 opens with Rachel, who's obviously Jacob's favorite.
Right.
And she is so envious of her sister, Leah.
Yeah.
Why? Leah's having kids, Rachel's not. And right away, you just feel this tension.
It's heartbreaking. You read Rachel's words and her pain is just raw. It just jumps right off the page. And it's not just some old cultural thing,
Yeah.
This desire to have kids and the pain of infertility is something people feel across time and cultures.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And when she says to Jacob, give me children or I'll die, that is intense.
Yeah.
I mean, you can kind of understand given the pressure women faced back then, but still.
Yeah. And that desperation leads Rachel to come up with a solution that was, pretty common back then.
Yeah.
She offers her maidservant, Bilhah, to Jacob as a surrogate.
So now we're in the territory of polygamy, which again is not something the Bible endorses as a good model.
Right.
In fact, every time you see it in the Bible, it seems to cause problems.
Yeah, you're right. This is not the Bible giving us a blueprint for a healthy family. It's more of a warning. Look at the consequences when you step outside of how God designed marriage to be.
And Bilhah ends up having two sons, Dan and Naphtali. And it's Rachel who gets to name them. Even the names are revealing.
They are. Dan means God has judged me. It's like she's saying, see, God is on my side. This baby is proof.
Right.
Naphtali means I have wrestled. So again, the sense of competition with Leah.
It's like they're trying to one-up each other through their kids. That can't be healthy for anyone.
No, you're exactly right. And the sad thing is, they're so focused on this competition that they're missing out on genuine connection and fulfillment. Not with Jacob, and not even with God.
Yeah, and then Leah sees what's happening and decides to do the same thing.
Oh, boy.
Offers her maidservant, Zilpah, to Jacob.
It's a total chain reaction of dysfunction, right?
Totally.
I mean, Leah wants the same thing. She wants to feel validated. She wants security, especially in this polygamous marriage. And even the names she gives her sons, Gad and Asher, a troop cometh and happy am I, it all just emphasizes that competition.
It's constant striving, you're never enough. And that's something I think a lot of people can relate to.
Oh, for sure. Maybe we don't have maidservants as surrogates in our day and age, but wanting that recognition, being terrified of being overlooked, those are universal human struggles.
Totally. Okay, so we're already deep in this mess.
Right.
And then we get the whole incident with the Mandrakes.
Mandrakes, yes.
Reuben, Leah's son, finds some, and Rachel becomes obsessed with them. Why? Because back then, people believed they could help women get pregnant.
And look at what Rachel does. She actually makes a deal with Leah. A night with Jacob in exchange for these mandrakes. That's how desperate she is. And you see how distorted their relationship has become.
And to be clear to our listeners, just because the Bible talks about these beliefs doesn't mean it endorses them.
Exactly.
It's just reflecting the culture of the time. God is the one who gives children, not magic plants.
Amen to that.
So amidst all this chaos, Leah keeps having children.
She does.
Issachar, Zebulun, and even a daughter, Dinah. But even with all these blessings, she still seems to be searching,
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What was she truly longing for? Just more children? Or was it Jacob's love, his acceptance, something deeper?
It's like she's looking for that validation in all the wrong places. And again, how many of us do that, even today?
You hit the nail on the head. We can try to fill that void with achievements, with other people's approval. But that deep sense of worth can only come from God.
And then finally, after years of heartache, Rachel gets pregnant, gives birth to a son named Joseph. And the text specifically says that God remembered Rachel, highlighting that this child is a gift from God.
That's huge. This is a major turning point, not just for Rachel, but for the whole story. Joseph, he's not just another kid. He becomes central to the future of Israel.
There's even a sense that he prefigures Christ. Both beloved sons rejected by their brothers, ultimately bringing redemption. It's amazing how God works.
It is amazing. Out of all this mess, all this human drama, God brings forth this child who's going to play a key role in fulfilling his promises. Talk about sovereignty. Talk about working through our flawed choices.
Yeah. So after all this family drama, Jacob decides he wants to go home. He's been working for Laban for years.
Right.
And it's like he's finally recognizing that God is leading him on, His purpose is somewhere else.
It's time to move on.
But Laban, he's not happy about it. He's gotten rich off Jacob's hard work.
And this is where it gets fascinating. The text shows us that even people who don't acknowledge God can still be blessed by him. Laban, with all his flaws, has prospered because of Jacob.
Right. God's blessings can flow through his people. They impact everyone around them, even if they don't get it. But eventually, Jacob and Laban make a deal. Jacob can keep tending the flocks, but he only gets the speckled and spotted animals.
Which, let's be honest, sounds like a terrible deal, right?
Yeah.
Those were like the least desirable animals back then. Laban probably thought he was so clever.
But guess what? Jacob's flocks explode. He uses this breeding technique with striped branches. And you read that, you might think, wait, is this magic?
Yeah, like some superstitious ritual.
Exactly. But then the text clarifies. God showed up in a dream and told Jacob to do this. It wasn't some trick. It was God working through Jacob.
I love that.
This whole interplay of human effort and divine intervention. Jacob is using his knowledge, but it's God who gives the increase.
So true. It's humbling, isn't it? We think we're in control, but God is the one orchestrating the results.
Very humbling. And that sets the stage for what happens next in Jacob's journey. Big challenges are coming, but he's going to see God's faithfulness in even more amazing ways.
I can't wait to dive into that.
So Jacob's flocks are exploding, but it's creating all this tension with Laban.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can imagine Laban was not thrilled with this whole speckled and spotted livestock situation.
Yeah, he probably felt used, especially after how he tricked Jacob with Rachel and Leah.
Yeah, it's like payback time, right? And the text really shows how their whole dynamic changes. Laban starts out generous, willing to make a deal, but it turns into resentment. He gets suspicious.
Right. And in the middle of all this, God steps in. He speaks to Jacob in a dream, tells him it's time to go home.
This is a huge moment, right? It shows that even though Jacob has made mistakes, even though he's been deceitful, God is still guiding him. God's still moving him towards his purpose.
It's like God's reassuring him. I haven't forgotten you. I'm still with you, even when things are a mess.
Exactly. Grace and faithfulness right there.
Yeah,
And it leads Jacob to make a big decision. He gathers his wives, his kids, all his stuff, and just takes off secretly back to Canaan.
Oh, man. Laban must have been furious.
Oh, he was. The text says he chases after Jacob, confronts him, wants to know why he left like that.
I can just hear the anger in his voice.
Yeah, it's palpable. And the confrontation really shows the difference between them.
Oh, yeah.
Laban is so focused on what he's lost, his workers, the chance to get even richer. He even accuses Jacob of stealing his gods.
Which is kind of ironic considering how Laban tricked Jacob into working extra years for Rachel.
Deception seems to run in the family.
It does.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that Laban is obsessed with stuff, with possessions, while Jacob is focused on something much bigger.
Right.
Family, faith, the future God promised him. It's like he's finally getting the bigger picture, the meaning of this whole journey.
And even in this tense moment, God steps in again. He warns Laban in a dream, don't mess with Jacob.
God is active here, protecting Jacob, making sure his plans are carried out. It's like he's saying, I got this, even when it looks like everything's falling apart.
And this encounter with Laban, it's like a turning point for Jacob.
Yeah.
He's not the same guy who left Canaan. He's been through so much, betrayal, tough times, but he's also seen God's faithfulness.
He's grown, he's matured, he's ready for what's next, but there's still this one thing hanging over him, this obstacle he has to face.
You're talking about Esau.
Yeah, the brother he tricked, the brother who might still be holding a grudge, even after all these years.
That encounter, it could be even more tense than anything we've seen so far.
It really shows how, even when we've experienced God's faithfulness, our past actions still have consequences. There are still things we need to deal with, relationships to mend.
Yeah, and in that way, Jacob's story is so relatable, you know? We all have those moments where our past comes back to haunt us. We have to deal with the fallout from bad choices.
But the encouraging thing is, God is there with us, even then. He doesn't abandon us. He walks with us, guides us, and ultimately leads us toward redemption. He leads us toward healing those relationships. Okay, so we left off with Jacob heading back to Canaan. He's gotten away from Laban. His flocks are doing great, but there's this big question mark. What's going to happen when he sees Esau again?
It's the ultimate test, right? It's one thing to have those material blessings, but it's a whole different story to face what you did, especially when you hurt someone.
And this wasn't just a little white lie. Jacob stole Esau's birthright, tricked his own father. You don't just bounce back from that. I mean, what are the chances Esau's going to be all smiles and hugs?
You can tell Jacob's worried. The text talks about his fear, wondering how Esau will react. It's that kind of fear that keeps you up at night thinking, what have I done?
So what does he do? Does he just march into Esau's territory and hope for the best?
Not quite. He sends messengers ahead with tons of gifts for Esau. Flocks of sheep, goats, camels, the works.
It's like he's trying to make up for it, smooth things over before they actually meet.
Yeah.
But even with all those gifts, the text says Jacob is still terrified.
It shows you sometimes even when you try to make things right, that guilt and fear are still there.
Right.
You can't just erase the pain you caused.
And it's then that Jacob prays. He tells God how unworthy he is, how he's messed up, and he begs God to protect him from Esau's anger.
It's a real, honest prayer. You see how vulnerable he is? And it reminds us that even people who are chosen by God, who've seen his blessings, they still have doubts. They still get scared.
Makes him human, you know?
Yeah.
He's made some bad choices, but he's still trying to figure things out.
Absolutely. We all wrestle with our flaws, our mistakes. And in a way, that struggle brings us closer to God. It forces us to rely on his grace.
And the amazing thing is God answers Jacob's prayer. He reminds him of the promises, of his faithfulness. Even though Jacob messed up, God is still there.
It's beautiful, isn't it? That unconditional love. God's always willing to meet us where we are, to forgive.
So Jacob, feeling a little braver, keeps going. And then we get to one of the most interesting parts of Genesis, this story of Jacob wrestling with God.
That's a passage that sparked so many interpretations.
Yeah.
On one level, it's this physical fight. Jacob meets this man at night, and they wrestle until morning.
But it's pretty clear this isn't just any guy. It feels like Jacob is wrestling with a divine being. Some people even think it's a pre-incarnate Jesus.
Wow.
That changes everything, doesn't it? It becomes this spiritual battle, like Jacob wrestling with his inner demons.
I love that.
All that guilt, his stubbornness, his desire to be in control, and ultimately surrendering to God's plan. It's like he's finally facing the deepest parts of himself.
And during this wrestling match, the man touches Jacob's hip, and it gets dislocated.
Ouch.
A physical reminder of Jacob's brokenness, his need for God.
It's like a breaking point. His pride, his self-reliance, all shattered, and that opens the door for real change.
That's powerful.
And then he gets a new name, Israel, which means he struggles with God.
That's huge. It's like a whole new identity. He's not the deceiver anymore. He's become someone who's wrestled with God, admitted his weaknesses, and come out with a deeper understanding of God's power.
So much growth.
So much growth.
And with this new name, this new understanding, Jacob finally meets Esau. And get this, Esau doesn't attack him. He runs to meet him, hugs him, and they both start crying.
What a moment. Reconciliation, forgiveness. It shows how God can work in unexpected ways to heal those broken relationships.
Talk about a plot twist. It's like all that worry, all that fear, for nothing. God had it all under control.
It shows you the power of forgiveness, right? Offering it, accepting it. Even the most broken relationships can be restored.
So Genesis 30 ends with Jacob and Esau back together, and Jacob finally entering the promised land. It's like a new beginning, the end of a really long journey.
It's a powerful reminder that even when we mess up, when life gets messy, God is still faithful.
He's guiding us, protecting us, and in the end, he keeps his promises.
Absolutely.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into Genesis 30. I hope this has got you thinking about your own journey. Where do you see God at work in your life? What are you wrestling with? And how have you seen God's faithfulness, even when you didn't deserve it?
Don't forget to check out the full chapter visualized on our YouTube channel. Share this with your friends, leave us a comment, and let's keep talking about this.
Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon to dive into another part of God's Word.